So another concepts which we have to understand in the climate change are critical. For example, pollution, waste, circular economy. We need to understand that in detail, including especially in urban areas, how it is acting. Uh, Pollution is and waste is definitely a major issue. Yeah, because it impacts the human health in people who are living in those urban areas. And there is a prediction that in 2047, India will be developed country and we will have 70% of our population living in the urban hubs. Okay, which will be very nastier, and that is why we need to consider sustainability equally while we are reaching to that development goal. And thankfully, and few of my friends were attending this prime ministerial oath ceremony. They told me, and definitely this is a very good point, that government of India, even though whatever situation they are in, they are going to focus on green energy and green part of the whole operation. So in his speech, Prime Minister Modi has specifically talked about it, and that creates a lot of impact in India in general for circular economy, green technology, green operations, as well as career in this area. Now, coming back, that we will have a developed country, but we need to have a sustainable developed country at that point in time. And that's why greening is equally important. Now, the concept of circular economy also need to be understand where we should understand that life cycle of the whole operation. Now, where focus should be on reducing the waste, more using your raw material, and recycling. These are the three critical concepts of circular economy which we need to understand. Now, current take, make, dispose model is unsustainable. Yeah. And that is why disposable plastic is the first thing everybody should remove from their houses. Yeah. Unfortunately, we are unable to do it, but I think slowly we are going in that direction. Second is improved waste management, and the shift to sustainable consumption and production is required. And that's why promoting house garden, terrace garden is a key in this area, because half of your organic waste you can recycle your own self for developing those plants. Third concept which you need to understand is ecosystem degradation and biodiversity loss when we are talking about climate change. Yeah, degradation of ecosystem and loss of biodiversity definitely undermines the natural capital and service economy which it depends on. Now, sustainable management of this ecosystem and conservation of biodiversity need to be integrated going forward with the economic planning. So there has to be material, financial impact of the same when I'm integrating it. Another big pointer for you guys. So in summary, let me tell you that climate change is not a simple topic. We are going to go into detail from this slide onwards. Yeah, where environmental and economy, which are deeply interconnected, along with current economic model, which are putting unsustainable pressure on climate, resource, and ecosystem, along with generating unmanageable amount of pollution and waste, is a critical to understand in environmental factor. And whole chapter is focuses on these 5 pointers. Yeah, because systemic shift of to a low carbon, resource efficient, circular economy that values enhances the natural capital is needed for sustainable development. Trade-offs between the short-term cost and the long-term sustainability need to be properly accounted for in decision making. And that's why this chapter is quite critical, not only for the exam point of view, but also for our normal understanding. Now, climate change and global GHG emission is the first task in 2024 CFA curricula they talk about. Okay, what we need to understand here, the impact of accelerated fossil fuel burning, okay, and CO2 emission which happens due to this activity. Now, I am trying to show you 2 graphs here. You need to read this graph from bottom to up. Okay, so one feeds to other. What I'm trying to highlight here is that rapid increase in emission is impacting the GHG in the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Okay, these are both of them are interrelated. And that's why the first graph is the increased emission of greenhouse gases, GHG, is shown over a period of 1850 nearly to 2019 in the graph which is in the bottom. You see the CO2 from fossil fuel has drastically increased over this period, specifically in the industrial era. This has peaked up. While CO2 from land use, land change, and fertility is another area which contributes the same. Since the industrial revolution, we have to understand that rapid increase in emission, specifically accelerated burning of fossil fuel, has led to a significant increase in this CO2 emission. You see the larger green part of the graph is the CO2 emission. Yeah. And this has happened exactly because we are in the business of using fossil fuel. This sudden surge, which you are seeing here, all other are gradually increasing, right? The CO2 from the land and the fertility, along with the non-CO2 emissions, they are also growing. The greenhouse gases, they are growing, but they are growing gradually. The CO2 has gone abruptly accelerating, in a way. Just to give you example, that if you are sitting in the car, okay, and suddenly you press your accelerator, what happens? Two things. Yeah. First thing happens that you have abruptly accelerated the car, so passenger feel differently compared to the gradual increase in speed. So if there is a gradual increase in the speed, people do not even feel sometimes. But if I put the pressure on the pedal, people feel that thrust, yeah, which shakes them. Similarly, in the case of environmental, this sudden increase of CO2 has created a nasty effect on the environment. I hope that made us very clear to you guys. Yeah, if it could have a gradually increased, maybe our environment might have been different than what we are seeing today. And that is why the climate sensitivity need to be understood. Yeah, through the transient climate response. Now, climate sensitivity is a topic in itself, and I have written a blog recently. Please go and read on our esgproinvest.com blog site. Yeah, to read in detail, where a lot of graphs I have produced for the understanding purposes, if you really want to understand how the climate sensitivity works. But limited time which we have, let me cover that this climate sensitivity is a way to measure potential temperature rise if CO2 concentration level increases. That's what it establishes. Okay. It's a scientific way to calculate that. For example, we were talking, right? 1.5 degree. If there is a change of 1 degree, yeah, or one time, for example, CO2 concentration level in your area, like Ramesh Akanpalli ji, he is in Hyderabad. If the CO2 concentration from today 420, it goes to 820, the estimated change in environment 2.5 degrees Celsius to 4 degrees Celsius. Can you understand that? Okay. So that's the impact of CO2. And that is what is measured in climate sensitivity. Yeah. That where they say that CO2 pre-industrial level, then look into that number. If you see the top graph, yeah, the concentration of carbon has gone to 410 in 2019, right? ppm of the CO2 in the atmosphere, which is nearly doubled at the rate which they had in the pre-industrial area. The temperature which has grown is 2.5 degree to 4 degrees Celsius based on the location we are talking about. And that's a huge change, okay? That is why the concept of climate sensitivity acts as a speed limit, okay, in the car sense, indicating that you are entering into danger zone. So don't exceed that temperature limit, which is set by climate, experts, backed by the science, and accepted by 191 countries all across under Paris Agreement of COP21 in 2015. Okay, transient climate response captures the temperature changes from gradual doubling of CO2 over 70 years, which is akin to a speedometer. You see, which measures your data, right? And estimates that how much of temperature impact of the carbon emission has happened. So this is one of the critical area you need to understand. Now, what do you need to understand also along with climate sensitivity is other greenhouse gases, right? The GHG on the top, you are seeing there, right? non-CO2 emissions, which we say. This includes methane. Again, methane, if you want to remember throughout your life, it comes from two major sources. One, the lakes and the permafrost, which has captured the methane as a gas under their and this gets produced from the same like when you produce oil and gas by putting the tree inside the earth for millions of years, it converts into oil. It also converts into methane as a gas. Second major source, which is a massive source, is a cow, emitting fart. Yeah, the cow fart also creates a lot of methane in the environment. Second, GHG gases, which we need to understand, is nitrous oxide, NO2. Again, a difficult level. You see, right now we are at 332 ppb of NO2 is available, but the growth from 1852 till today is a gradual one. So it is not that high. Yeah, while the CH4 is little abrupt, which has gone to 1866 in 2019. So these are the three, and the other gases which are combined of other small gases, we call them fluorinated gases, which have a much higher global warming potential. By the way, as I told you, 10,000 more compared to CO2, despite have a very small and shorter atmospheric lifetime. That's why people do not consider. The second pointer is they are very small. And second pointer, which I just mentioned, is they have a shorter atmospheric lifetime. In book, they say in 12 years, these gases, whatever you emit, it's subsided. Yeah. And so it's a natural process where it gets captured, and that's why people are not that worried. However, methane, just to give you some statistics in perspective, and it can come in exam as well, is 30 times stronger than CO2 in capturing the heat. Okay. And its warming effect. But it only lasts for 12 years. Sorry, methane lasts for 12 years. Okay. In the atmosphere. The interplay between their high impact and the shorter lifespan definitely present both as a risk and opportunity, such as significant short-term climate impact from sudden methane release, yeah, from permafrost, and potential cooling effect if all GHG emission reduced to zero can impact the earth warming as well. Yeah, because these gases which suddenly gets emitted from the earth can create a huge effect. So that's the climate change on the global GHG emission. So another big concept I have just cleaned for you and explained it is the GHG. Clear? I hope you will never forget the definition of climate action, action, and GHG emission. Now let's go to the impact of this accelerated fossil fuel burning and CO2 emission. Again, I am referring to the book, CFA curricular book, where the human activity which are responsible for global warming need to be considered. Now the graph in left shows you the global surface temperature, which has increased over 1850 to 1900 until today, 2020. You see, it 1800 to 1900, it was only 1.1 degrees Celsius compared to the 1800 to 1900. Okay, the difference is 1.1 degrees Celsius, but the impact is massive. Okay, so that is seen that human are responsible for this on the right hand side graph, because the observed warming, whatever we are observing, is driven by the emission from human activity, with the GHG warming partly masked by the aerosol cooling. Okay, so aerosol also helps you to cool, but sometimes it traps the gas. Okay, so the total human influence is much larger than well-relaxed GHG. That's what this graph shows. Now, if that is clear, we can go to another part of the discussion, which is limiting the global warming to managing a bathtub. Now, what I'm doing is I'm comparing how to limit the global warming. If you want to limit it, of course, there is no other way around. I'm trying to compare this with the managing a bathtub. So if you say imagine that you are lying in the bathtub, okay, a 5-star hotel or in your house. And what you have done is you have opened your tap for getting that bubbles, in your bathtub to enjoy it. But at the same time, you have removed the rubber at the bottom. Just imagine this scenario. And that is the exact scenario which is right now happening in the environment. Yeah. So you can't control the net removals, right? Which is getting out from the system. But the carbon emission remain the same. Yeah, so you can't control it. That's what I'm trying to reflect. Since the industrial revolution, the accelerated burning of fossil fuel has led to these kind of scenarios. Okay, where we are facing right now, that the CO2 emission remains the same, and we are trying to remove those CO2 through putting new plants, or doing more stops, but you can't control the increase of CO2 by not targeting. If you will close the tap water, yeah, then maybe all the water will reside from your bathtub, and then there will be no carbon emission happening in the bathtub. There is no water right now. If that can be only possible when you close the tap, but unfortunately you can't close the tap. Can you stop your industrial activity? Can you stop China or India to grow, which they have been lagging for thousands of years because foreign powers were minting them. So left and right, we were part of the colonialism of UK and US, been suffering from the same scenarios. So can we stop this CO2 emission compared to what people are doing by planting trees or accelerating the other effect? Now, if you want to understand how this works, let me explain you that first. Okay. So what is the carbon budget? If you want to control this scenario, of course, through you can only do is closing the tap or reducing the tap slowly, and then let the waters go out from the bathtub equally. You may control the global warming. And that's another concept which has to be very clear, is the limiting the global warming, how that happens. Now, to do that, there are several ways which companies are adopting. And one of the ways they adopt is carbon budgets. Yeah. So let me explain you the carbon budget. Of course, I am using here the World WRI website to explain this concept. But you need to understand this into two steps. One is the carbon budget, and then the probabilistic nature of the carbon budget need to be understood. Okay, so these two parts I'm going to explain you in next two slide, and then we will stop. I don't want to go into much tougher discussion today. We'll have it on the weekend. Now, carbon budgets are not exact probabilistic scenario where you will say that, like your annual budget, where you can say, I will spend on food so much, I will spend so much on my clothes, I will spend so much on my travel. You can't do that. It is a probabilistic in nature. And that's why in company, you always use probability, right? That this year we think last year plus 5%. However, there will be chances that 50% of the time this will not happen. Okay. There will be 20% expenditure in first 6 months, and then it will be no expenditure in next 6 months. 20% extra expenditure in first 6 months, and then next 6 months there is no expenditure, and that's why it compensates. And maybe we are on the same budget. So carbon budgets are similar, okay, and it is estimated that it is not exact, but it is a probabilistic scenarios which you do in your companies. Okay, meaning they can predict likely outcome based on the current data and trends, but they cannot assure you this is the outcome. And that's why people take a range. When I will show you three chart later, this slide, you will see that how that budget works. It cannot be one straight red line. It has to have an area on top of it and bottom of it. Of course, I'm not going to explain it today. We will explain it on the next lecture. That will give you time to read this topic and come back. Okay. And then I will explain you wherever you have a trouble with. For example, to have 60% of chance for limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is Paris Agreement says, the remaining carbon budget from 2020 is 600 gigaton of CO2. Look, they have allocated approximately 500 gigaton to all the countries. Okay, that much you should use as a country. So out of that, 60% is already been consumed. How much is left? That you need to see. Okay. So that is why all measurement happens in gigatons. Whoever have attended that GRI webinar, they know how the gigatons reporting happens, why it is 25,000, and how you allocate that from your expected budget in the carbon accounting. To better understand these probabilities, climate model need to simulate different scenarios Okay, and that's why climate scenarios are another concept which we will learn very soon. Okay, and that a simulation which replicates different scenario conditions with varying technology, because the technology development is going at the same level of acceleration as we are getting threatened by the climate changes, right? So climate change definition, that's why it was important. So technology is also improving. You need to consider that. You need to consider the emission levels, which are also accelerating, and sometimes it is getting moderated, and socio-economic factors that because of you, country like Guyana is getting wiped off, or certain countries are getting underwater, those need to be also understood. And interlinkage between these three will create carbon budget. Okay. So what are the likely chance of limiting global temperature to 2 degrees Celsius? Above pre-industrial level, you can do it through the carbon busting. Understanding the carbon busting, it is an international, of course, international scientific community estimates that budget has to be 1 trillion ton of carbon, means 1000 giga carbon equivalent we are talking here, to maintain that 2 degrees Celsius water. And they have taken 2011 as the base. And then they are allocating an additional 1000 gigatons, which that's why 500 is only remaining now till 2045. And that's why most of the country is trying to get to net zero by 2050. I give you explanation on that as well. A lot of people ask that question. Then why 2050 is the ideal year? Why not 2100? Why not 2070 where India is predicting? Because people are expecting that is the budget left for everybody to use. If you cross that year, you will be in trouble. And that's why a lot of countries are trying to achieve it before that. So the model aims to identify common outcome and assesses the probability of staying within certain temperature threshold. Now, this is one of the example, one company, of course, I'm talking here, some specific company. It's an investment company which has done this global carbon budget between 2009 to 2018, okay, where they have tried to reflect the probabilistic nature of the carbon budget, which are not exact, but probabilistic in nature, and that has to be understood. For example, they have said that, look, total emission is going to happen is 40.3. Half of it is coming, not half, approximately 34.8. So 90% is coming from the industry. Then from the land use change, so fossil fuel consumption, sorry. So fossil fuels and industry is producing 34.8 out of 40.3 gigatons. 5.5 is coming from the land use changes. Yeah, by harvesting, by cutting trees, etc. 5.5 will come. And then you have atmospheric CO2 growth rate as well, which contributes to 18 gigatons, okay, of CO2 emission. And they are measuring year on year, okay? Remember that this is billion tons of CO2. Giga is billion. And now total sinks. So this is what you have emission. And then there are sinkage as well. What do you mean by sink? There are certain entity like your tree, your land, as well as ocean, which observes this carbon. It's a natural phenomena again, right? So that is limited to only 20.9. Yeah. So total sink is 11.7, which is land sink, and your land means Amazon forest, etc. All the forests along with the land, hills, etc. They observe, which is 11.7, and 9.2 ocean has a capacity to observe. So this emission and sink in billion tons of carbon dioxide per year, which is PEG CO2 per year, average has been shown for this 9 to 10 years. Okay, so that's how the carbon budget happens and people does it. And these carbon budgets further used by the sustainability officers or report writers to set your net zero targets for your company, country, businesses, individuals. Clear? This is the first concept of the major concept which is going to come up, which is where we will talk about the carbon mitigation, carbon emission, and we will also talk about the climate change adoption. So climate change adoption and mitigation is going to come. Before that, we will also cover that how the path-dependent technological impact happens. Okay, so those are a few slides which I have prepared for today, but I think it's so A lot of information overload. I don't want to disturb you guys. Have your good day. It's office working day. We will again meet on Saturday or Sunday. This looks like Sunday will be which day? 15, 16. So we'll meet on 16 and we'll try to cover this whole part. Clear? Thank you very much for coming in. And